I apologize for the difference in qualities of my videos all the time. Sometimes it's like super high quality on my camera, and sometimes it's on my phone, and audio as well. I wanted to um, talk about this topic of how to relate to your parents and love them um, if they have caused you a lot of trauma, or the relationship with them as you're growing up caused you a lot of trauma. And maybe you grew up in dysfunction, in dysregulated environments, or you were abandoned or mistreated in any other way, or any number of things really, and they have all caused you distress. I'm coming from a personal perspective as someone who has had a very difficult relationship with my mom and my grandmother as well, and my sister, who all raised me. And as a teenager, I had a lot of fights with my mom, and then whenever I used to visit my grandmother, I would find it so difficult to be around her, be in the same space with her. I would want to just close myself in the room and not talk to her. And with my sister, we don't really have fights, didn't have fights as adults, but would go through periods of not talking to each other because it would just get too much, because there's still some unresolved stuff from the past. But things have been shifting a lot as I was doing my own inner work and understanding more about trauma in general. I think naturally, as a result of all of those things, I have been going through greater and greater separation from all of them, in a sense of like a psychological separation, right? Because especially for someone like me, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that will resonate with that, there's such a thing as an enmeshment trauma, whereby if your parents or people that raised you didn't treat you as a separate person, but they treated you as an extension of them, it's like you are their belonging, or otherwise, it creates that thing called enmeshment trauma. And when you grow up, you can get into all these codependent dynamics with people who find hard to set boundaries, and you lose yourself in relationships, you merge with people, and you might need to have a lot of time on your own, or you would feel desire to be on your own because it feels too much to be around other people, because you can't be authentic around them. And I had that, and I still have that to an extent with my family, but I can observe it so much more, and I've come such a long way, especially with my mom, because of the contrast of our relationship is so big. And I wanted to talk about it, and kind of the things I did that brought our relationship here, and yeah, just some tips for you, and not necessarily only just tips, but also just some awarenesses that came about as a result. First thing that you need to understand is that you need to stop forcing yourself to love them. You cannot just make yourself love someone, especially if you have a lot of feelings of resentment, anger, grief, sadness towards them, and they're so big that it almost feels like there's no space for love. There's no point trying. Okay, the thing that you need to be focusing on is really addressing all of those emotions that I've just mentioned first. And love is actually an aftermath. It's a result of kind of removing all of those weeds and rocks in the way of a stream, right? A stream of love that can naturally be there. And a part of that is really kind of starting to be authentic, in a sense of being honest with your parents or your person you are thinking of when you're listening to this video, watching this video, um in how you feel. If they want to, like, kind of snuggle up on a sofa, watching telly, and your whole body, feels like, like, don't touch me, I don't want you to touch me. You need to learn those boundaries. You need to ask for that space, and that will be bloody terrifying. I think the first time I did something like that, I finished uni, so I would have been 22, 23, 23, I think. I moved back home with my mom, and as she always has done, she never knocked on my door in my room. So she would just come in, uh, and because again, I wasn't a separate person. I was just an extension of her, and I didn't need space. I didn't need boundaries. Right? It was so hard. And I remember the day I was like brewing with this resentment and anger and rage towards her, because I was like, how fucking dare you not knock on my door? Like, who do you think you are? I had all of this inside and I couldn't say a word. Um, and I remember this day, we went for a walk, and I was like, Mom, I have to tell you something. Or I can't remember how the conversation started, but I started crying. And she was like, "Oh, is everything okay?" And we sat under a tree because she was like so confused about what's going on. And I was like, I feel like really need to ask you something, and I'm scared, of how you might react. And I'm still crying, and she's like, what is it? What is it? And I said, I really need you to knock on my door before you come in. Like, I really don't like it when you just walk inside without asking me permission first, or knocking. And I could see on her face that she didn't, I don't know for what reason specifically, but she didn't particularly like what I said. But she was very respectful, and she said, of course I will do that. And so she has been doing that since. And it was awkward to start with because it was a new thing that we haven't done before, but it was in place, and it felt slightly better. So that's the kind of even such a simple thing I was absolutely terrified of saying, and asserting that boundary, but it was absolutely necessary for me to start to feel like I am my own person. And if I have this visceral reaction of rage to something that is done or not done, then that means it's important, and it's a boundary that's getting crossed. There's a need that's not being met, need for independence, need for being recognized as an adult, as a separate person. It was not done, it was not met. And so I needed to stand up for myself, and I was shaking, I was crying, and I was still saying it. And that's the most important thing. Just because it feels wrong, and just because it feels like, I don't know, like the world is about to end, it does not mean that that's a wrong thing to do. That's kind of the first step to really learning how to set boundaries, is recognizing what makes that rage come up, what makes you feel, like you want to do this, like, don't touch me. um, and you need to face up to it however you can. And don't be scared to ask for help from someone else, whether it's a therapist, or a friend, or a sibling that you trust, or another adult in the house, or anyone you can ask for that support. Because what I didn't understand, that's another thing I'm going to share now, is that, and that's rarely talked about, sometimes we literally need someone to tell us what to say. Like, we need someone to tell us, this is how you say this, like, this is how you place a boundary, right? Not just place a boundary. Like, we need someone to literally spell it out for us, because we don't learn this stuff. So how are we supposed to know, right? If like, as children, we don't know automatically how to, like, ask for something at a shop. And nowadays you don't have that, but when I was little, in Latvia, you would often ask things from over the counter. So my mom and my grand would like tell me like, you just need to ask, can I please have a kilogram of mince, So like you are told as a child, this is how you do things, and nobody teaches us this is how you place boundaries, this is how you ask for space, this is how you ask to be respected. It's something that sometimes when we're on this path of learning or relearning how to assert ourselves and take up space, we actually need other people that have gone through this journey or that already know this just naturally, or however they know it. We need them to actually guide us. Saying love yourself, or place boundaries, or take care of yourself, like it's all well and good, but like how do you do that? So that's another thing I was going to say, is that sometimes you just need to ask and find ways in literal words to say, and that in itself is a learning curve. So when you start to place boundaries, what it will do is it will start to allow you to process that rage. And so when you start processing that rage and the anger diminishes over time because your boundaries start to be being respected, there will be more space, and you will just naturally feel more comfortable around your parents. You'll feel that natural love, or some kind of just a little bit of peace, but there will be a shift. Now, of course, there is a lot of parents and a lot of people that do not care for you placing your boundaries. That's a really hard thing. Let's just acknowledge that first. If you live with people, or if you're still, someone living with your parents, and they don't respect what you ask them to do, it can bring up that like almost like another layer of trauma, right? Because it's like now I'm asserting my boundary, and it's still not being, like, I'm still not heard, and it's something that we might need to grieve first. That there's such a huge rupture in that relationship, whereby you're still not being respected. It might be a case that because, as I said, you might be introducing a new thing into your household, that you might need to remind them a few times, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, people can genuinely forget because it's not a habit yet, and it does not mean that they disrespect you. It just means that they forgot. Okay, so just kind of try for the first few times to like not get angry at them for it, or yell. Really notice that feeling in you of, oh, I'm being disrespected, and that desperation, and just kind of tend to it, and then gently remind them, Mom, we talked about this, I really need you to knock on my door, or Dad, like, please don't, like, I don't know, whatever your dad might be doing. Like, don't do my laundry, like I want to do my laundry myself. Like, remind them. And that's really important, because also that's another layer. What some people do is they say once and then they never say again, and if that need hasn't been met because that person forgot, or they didn't realize maybe how you want things done, you're not asserting that boundary again, and it's getting brushed under the rug, and then you will feel even worse. So it's really, really important that you keep asserting that boundary, keep asking. Of course, if it's not being met still, after a few times, you can ask them why they're not meeting it. And if an answer is not really a valid answer, they're just being rude and abusive, or they genuinely don't care, if you can, you need to leave. You need to leave that space where you're not respected, where something that is really, really important to you is not being met. It's an environment that you need to simply leave and withdraw yourself from, as soon as possible, of course, like as safe as possible. So that's the boundary side of things. Now, when I stopped living with my mom and she would come and visit, there was still things being said and done that were violating my personal boundaries, as they have always done. And there's been cases where I would lash out, I would yell, And that's something that my mom has not seen a lot of from me, so it would scare her a little bit. And I didn't mean to do it, but I think at that time of my life, I still didn't know how to regulate my rage, and I was just at the end of my tether. So in some ways, to be honest, I'm grateful for it, because it really showed my mom, like, don't fuck with me, you know. I am a separate being. I'm not a child anymore. You can't do that to me. I wish it wasn't done in that way, but it's just what happened, and I don't necessarily regret it. I do wish it was different, but it's not. So, um, but what you do when you move out and you don't live with them anymore, what you want to start doing is to, there'll be a layer of memories and things that have happened in the past, obviously, that are painful and traumatic, etc. And what you want to do is build on top of those layers, right? Like when you've got that foundation of boundaries, and you feel like more or less like, okay, this is me, this is them, you know, and that in itself might take years. It took me years, and that's okay. And our relationship was very like tense. But what could have sped it up, because I only realized it later, um, is including new memories. You need to create new memories with your parents. So if you're normally, like, I don't know, going to them and staying in their house, and you're just kind of just sitting and drinking tea and talking all the time, sitting and talking, and if that's pretty much all you do, it doesn't go down well most of the time, because when we talk and we sit, we get into a bit of a freeze. That's not good for our nervous systems, and then we can also start mulling over past, and it's just not a good ground for health in this relationship. So what I've started doing with my mom is, whenever I'd go to her, or she would come to me, especially in my household, it's so typical to like sit and have tea and just talk for hours. And I've realized over the years, how exhausting I feel after that, how much I actually really don't like doing that. Um, and and that over time, like as the hours go by, we start to get into these like holes, you know, of our minds, and then we start to argue, and then it's just so toxic, and it's like, let's not do this. So what I started doing is, before I'd even go to my mom, or before she'd come to me, I would think of activities. I'd buy some board games. I would think about like different movies to watch. We would plan outings, you know, to a park or a National Trust place or a garden or whatever, right? To the beach, have a picnic. So I'm planning activities, because sitting and talking and then, you know, trying to fill up space with conversation when you have a traumatic past with your parents is not necessarily a good thing. Okay. Because at least for me, a lot of that trauma came from very painful, very horrible arguments, and so talking in itself is kind of arousing for me in a negative way, for my nervous system. So for me personally, the less talking we could do and the more we could do activities and share moments together in a more present way, the better our relationship got, because we could finally share a laugh and just kind of enjoy each other's company, and my mom could relax as well, you know. And um, so that's something that I would really recommend, and I've recommended that to a friend of mine somewhat recently, and he also said, you know, like, that's a great point. So yeah, I thought that's also something to share. And So that's the kind of the tips, if you like, and something as that came as an insight, you know, that allowed me to love my mom more. And again, it took literal years to get to this stage. Also, by the way, my mom did do some of her own inner work. She just, you know, watches a lot of videos, and it's nothing like I would have loved for her to do some actual trauma work, and I don't think she'll ever do it, and that's okay. I've also come to acceptance that she will go through the stuff how she can, and to the capacity that she has, because I've realized, and maybe this is something helpful for you to understand, is that, you know, sometimes we really want our parents to do that inner work and heal their trauma so that they can finally understand, blah, blah, blah. I don't know about your parents, but I know that the kind of crap that my mom has lived through and my grandmother has lived through and my sister, some of that I would not want even my worst enemy to go through. And for me to expect that my mom needs to develop enough capacity to sit with that is actually, some people simply will never be able to. And that is why our brains have this function of just like, you know, forgetting forgetting memories and erasing certain bits of our past, because some stuff is so traumatic that you know, consciously a lot of people will never think, you know, I want to revisit that, or I want to delve into that or process that. um like it takes years of nervous system work to really feel I'm ready to look into that stuff. So I've accepted that my mom will probably die having never processed some of the stuff that has made her the way she is, and I needed to understand that now I just need to learn to love her and accept her with it, and not expect her to process some of that toxic behavior and whatever, and simply learning to see it as her own way of trying to survive, as her own way of trying to defend herself, of trying to protect herself. Um, and it took me years to even get to the point where I can say that, you know, because for a few years when I started to process a lot of this stuff from our past, I all I had was anger and blaming her, and that's okay. And I needed to do that because for years as a child, you know, feeling like I was mistreated, feeling like I was neglected, I had the right to feel that, and you do too, and everyone does. Um, and so this is another thing I want to mention really here, is that you are allowed to feel many different things at the same time. You are allowed to feel anger. You are allowed to hate your parents. You are allowed to grieve the childhood you have never had and you wanted to have. You are allowed to feel like guilty for feeling any of this. You are allowed to, at the same time as all of those things, still love your parent. You are allowed that. Um, and actually, I've heard someone, I can't remember where that came from now, but I remember someone saying that sometimes we're not angry at our parent, we're angry that we love our parent. Like, it's like, I'm angry that I love you, because if I didn't love you, this wouldn't hurt so much. You know, so it's, I need you to understand that there is enough space for all sorts of feelings in you, and you need to not, there's no need to resist any one of them, or say that that's not okay to feel, or I shouldn't feel that way, or, well, if I hate them then I can't really love them. Like, you really can, and you're allowed to. So just give yourself that permission to feel whatever you're feeling. And so what came to me as an insight after years of processing and allowing myself to feel whatever I feel or whatever I don't feel that I should be feeling, first I started to realize this separation of like, oh, my mom isn't just a mom, she's a human, separate human being from me, with her trauma, her upbringing, her, you know, I mean, the years when she grew up in Soviet Russia, and the horrors that were happening around her, then in the post-Soviet Latvia, and her marriage and her father, and, you know, the alcoholism and the abuse, and it's like all of that, she had to live through all of that, and then she believed that the right thing to do was to bring up children, and she did that in the best way she could, given everything she went through. um and you know, it's all well and good to say like, well, she should have never had children if she didn't know how to raise them. Like, I realized that she was not born at the same time as me. She was born 30 years before me. And life was so vastly different then. Like we need to really remember that as well. Like our parents and grandparents, you know, it's not just words to say, oh, they're from different generation. Like conceptualize that, understand what that means, being born into and growing up in a different generation where there was no internet, there were no phones, pretty much, well, mostly, you know, and um, like information was brought to people differently, and war was not that long before that, World War II, and to really understand that the kind of world they lived in, how different it was, you start to really build even more compassion towards that. um Again, that was like a few years after processing a lot of that anger first. And then, and this is like really recent actually, there was another layer to me, to my capacity to see my mom as, you know, as a separate being, was actually to start seeing her not just a separate human, but as a woman. As a woman. And I think that's happening because I am becoming more of a woman in myself. And I was just kind of relaying how I feel and what I'm going through onto her, because I'm also now, I will be soon kind of the same age. In about a year, I'll be the same age as she was when she gave birth to me, already having my sister. And to think that she had to raise two children on her own because my dad died after I was born. She had to move back in to live with her mom, and they had a horrible relationship. Um, and all of, at the same time, she was a woman with hormones, with periods, with so much sexual energy and rage and on top of like the childhood stuff that she like, right? So it's like that's separate, but like being a woman and having no, you know, apart from really like mostly instincts and kind of intuition, with a little bit of, you know, her mom's guidance, and a little bit of book reading that she did, she had to raise two children. Like, you know, given all of that, I mean, she absolutely did the best she could, but she didn't do too bad, you know. and and imagining her at that time of, you know, the world's evolution, and being a woman, being a single mother, living with her own parent that she had terrible relationship with, and just how that would feel, you know. That's like a new layer that just opened up to me recently, of that next level of compassion, of like, she's not just a separate human being, she's also a woman. And I think there's a different feeling when you really feel like when you connect to your own femininity as a woman. And maybe that's the same if you're a guy and you're thinking about your dad. It could be the same for you, you know, thinking like he's not just a separate person, he's also a man. And you know, you might relate more to that sort of like, it's like solidarity between men and then solidarity between women. um yeah, that's opening up like a new layer for me of compassion and understanding my mom. and and with understanding comes that extra layer of peace. Because I can't say that I have a lot of love for my mom. You know, I don't know if I will ever have it. I'm not. I don't think I'm chasing it anymore. You know, I've always struggled with feeling love towards my mom. But I'm content more now with the feelings that I do have, which is a lot more gratitude than I've ever had, a lot more compassion, a lot more understanding, a lot more that solidarity, and just care as well. you know, just caring for her and about her, and not thinking of her as like, oh, she's the mom, so she had to do all of these things and she had all of these responsibilities and she failed at all of them. It's like she's doing her bloody best. Yeah. And it's not a cognitive understanding. It's really now. It's really emotional. It's really like I feel it, and you can't talk your way into that. You just have to sit in it for a bit. Um, so yeah, I think like letting go of the need to like love her has been helpful. You know, it's like I don't need to feel this love, but I can feel a lot of other good emotions and feel good about our relationship um, in a different way, right? Like, so yeah, think about how your relationship with your parents can look, and maybe try to break out of certain standards and um, templates that maybe you've put on yourself or your parents are trying to put on your relationship. You know, like my mom, she's always really tried to like be almost like a friend, you know, it's like a gossipy friend, girlfriend to me, and I really didn't like that. I didn't want that. And so instead of trying to do whatever the template is, see how you can really make it something new that works for both of you. Maybe it will never be what you've always wanted it to be, and it will never be what your parents wanted to be, but it can be something different, and something that can honor the pain that all of you have gone through, um, and also can be like a blueprint for your future together. Um, so yeah, I think I'll end it here. I'll try and timestamp it, but these are the things that I've gone through that helped me, that I've understood as a result. And yeah, just the most important thing is like don't rush and don't push yourself to be anything you're not right now. Um, Boundaries are important. Honoring all of your emotions is important, and then developing a new picture of what your relationship can look like going forward, which includes, you know, maybe thinking of different activities you can do, maybe starting a new hobby together, going traveling together. You know, could look like many different ways. So yeah, but take it step at a time. Don't try and jump. Right? It's like if you have a lot of hatred right now, you cannot start to like just, you know, go and spend lovely time together. You need to discharge some of that. You need to take care of the needs that aren't being met. Um, so yeah, righty, I'll stop ranting now. Um, I hope this was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I talk about all sorts of different topics: relationships, spirituality, mental health. This is kind of my first one actually about parents. Let me know if you want me to talk more about that, anything specific. Um, and sometimes I do podcasts, not podcasts, like interviews with other practitioners that I resonate with, that I think have a lot of value to bring. So yeah, stick around for those as well. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one.